La Belle Dame sans Merci, a ballad by John Keats. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, alone and palely loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, so haggard and so woe begone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest done. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moist and fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose fast withered too. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a faery's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild.
I made a garland for her head, and bracelets too, and fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long. For sidelong would she bid and sing a fairy song. She found me words of relish sweet, and honey wild, and mallow dew. In sure, in language strange she said, I love thee true. She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses full. And there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, a woe betide, the latest dream I ever dreamt, on the cold hillside. I saw pale kings, and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La Belle Dame sans Merci, the hearth in thrall. I saw their starved lips in the gloam, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me there, on the cold hillside. And this is why I sojourn here, alone and palely loithering. Through the sedge is withered from the lake, and no birds sing. La Belle Dame sans Merci is French, and is translated to The Beautiful Lady Without Mercy. It is written by John Keats in the spring of 1819. John Keats was a poet, more exactly an English romantic poet. He was born in 1795 and died at age 25. Because of his short life, he only had 4 active years with writing and publishing his works. This poem was inspired by his own life's conflicts and love life. The more we look at the knight's story, the easier it gets to draw parallels to his own life. An example of this is how Keats felt the time before his death, lost and abandoned, which the knight did as well. The ballad seems just like another romantic poem where a young knight falls in love with a beautiful elfish woman in a medieval setting. However, at the end he is literally on the verge of dying because of his encounter with her, which is not typical, especially when there is no mention of her physically harming him. We're going to try looking deeper into the meaning of it all, even though the theme is already quite clear: obsession. In the first stanza, an unknown speaker finds a knight and asks what is wrong. In the second stanza, he repeats his question because the knight apparently didn't answer at once. This means that Keats used anaphora to make that point. In both of these stanzas, it seems that he points out that winter is close, for an example by saying that no birds sing and that the harvest is done. In the third stanza, he proceeds by describing the night. He says, I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moist and fever dew. That he sees a lily on the knight's brow is a metaphor, because it actually suggests that the knight's face is as pale as a lily. He then continues about the generally sick and feverish look, and describes how the color is fading from his skin.
The rest of the poem is the story the knight is telling him. He explains that he met a beautiful fairy-like lady in the fields or in the meads. He basically bathed her in flowers by making, for example, bracelets, a flower crown, and a flower belt. The last 2 lines in the 5th stanza indicate that they slept with each other. After this, he let her ride his horse, which also might have a sexual meaning. Anyhow, he says, and nothing else saw all day long, which probably means that he couldn't focus on anything else while she was singing to him. The seventh and the eighth stanza consist of the mysterious creature giving him all kinds of food and persuading him that she loves him. She tells him that in a language strange, which is the first sign of her not being all normal and good. She then proceeds with taking him to her elfin grot, which is a cave, and there she gazed and sighed full sore. From our point of view, it means that she starts to cry, though we will never know why. It's left to our imagination. He kisses away her tears with 4 kisses. Here again, this might be another sign that something is off, because usually in fairy tales, as this seems to be, the magic number is 3. After the 8th stanza, there is a turning point where it turns dark. Apparently, she lulled him to sleep, and he had the latest dream he ever dreamed, which might mean it was his last dream ever. It was a nightmare in which he faced all kinds of other men, both princes and kings and other knights, who were all lured into the fairy's trap. They cried, "La belle dame sans merci, the heaven thrall," which in English means, "The beautiful woman without mercy has a knight and thrall," or in bondage, as we would say. This is a warning sign which shines through the next stanza as well, where it says, "With horrid warning gaped wide." They were starving, and so was he when he awoke on the hillside where he was found. In the last stanza, the knight explains that this is why he was lying there, even though winter is coming. All in all, the poem shows how dangerous blind obsession can be. Something you also could think about is that not only one, but many human beings got tricked by the same creature. I believe Keats thereby wanted to show that it could happen to anyone at any time. We think the general message is that whenever you are tempted to neglect your responsibilities or to leave your morals behind in order to pursue an obsession, you should take a step back and think again. As mentioned, there are all these warning signs throughout the text, which are more or less clear to anyone who isn't in the knight's position. For example, that she uses a strange language, or that she takes him back to her cave. By including these details, we believe Keats also wanted to point out that obsession makes you blind. All things considered, even though there is a lot of description of beautiful flowers and singing and food and romance and fairy tale-like settings, when you look into the details, the ballad is generally darkly written.
As we have already said, John Keats was an English romantic poet, which means he and the poem La Belle Dame sans Merci is written in the Romantic period. The Romantic period began around 1770 and ended in the 1850s. It succeeded the Enlightenment, the scientific and factual period of history. Its name, the Romantic period, is actually quite misleading because the period was so much more than romantic. For the poets of this era, the agenda was to praise the nature, the beauty and the love. The love for everything natural, the love of another person, or the love towards a child.
The title is an allusion to a much earlier work of literature. It's from a medieval romance by the French poet Alain Chartier, and the poem itself has many of the same elements as a medieval romance, such as knights, fairies, dream sequences. So by titling the poem with a line from a famous romance, Keats calls up all those associations right from the beginning. In the Romantic Age, reason no longer held the high place it had held in the 18th century. Its place was taken by imagination and emotion. Romantic poets cultivated reverence for the natural world, idealism, physical and emotional passion, and an interest in the mystic and supernatural, as we can clearly see in the poem. In this poem we can find some of the most important romantic themes and some partnering themes in Gothic literature, for example, individual mortality and its mirroring in the cycles of nature, love and death, temptation and duty, dream and waking. This poem is typical of the Romantic Age because there is a dreamlike, visionary quality to the poem. The poem also celebrates creativity rather than logic. A key idea in romantic poetry is the concept of the sublime. This term conveys the feelings people experience when they see awesome landscapes or find themselves in extreme situations, which cause both fear and admiration. And in this poem, we read about the knight who encounters a beautiful fairy in the woods and he falls in love with her. This lady is mysterious and there seems to be a supernatural aura about her. She speaks an unidentified language, so we can only try to imagine something like this.
The main sources we have used in this presentation is Poetry Foundation, Wikipedia and NDLA.